March 8th through the 12th, lesson 27. Alright, we're going to continue with our recursive challenge problem, the double and add 5 game. If you remember, we did the double and add 5 game in the last lesson. We actually looked at the smallest number that we could produce 100 or greater in 3 rounds or less, and then we actually went to what is the smallest number that could produce 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds or less. Alright, so we're going to look at that. We're going to continue with the recursive challenge problem. We're going to learn the meaning and notation of recursive sequences. We're going to use recursive sequences to model and answer problems. We're going to create equations and inequalities to solve these types of problems. So let's just go ahead and look at the work. Now, this kind of goes back over what the double and add 5 game is. I'm not going to repeat that because we talked about that last time. Alright. So let's talk about this. Given a starting number, you double it and add 5 to get the result of round 1. You double the result of round 1 and add 5, and so on. The goal of the game was to find the smallest starting whole number that produced a result of 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds or fewer. Alright, so let's look at example number 1. It says, recall exercise 3 from the previous lesson. Using a generic initial value, a sub 0, and the recurrence relation a sub I plus 1 is equal to 2a sub I plus 5, for I is greater than or equal to 0, find a formula so that a sub 1, a sub 2, a sub 3, a sub 4 in terms of a sub 0. Alright, so it tells me, so I'm looking for a sub 1, a sub 2, a sub 3, a sub 4. So it says that my generic value of a sub 0 is 2a to the sub I plus 5. Now, I is the number that I'm going to plug in. Alright, so it says I has to be greater than or equal to 0. Alright, so a sub 1, a sub 2, a sub 3, and a sub 4. This is what we're trying to find. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see really well. Alright. So once again, this is a review from the previous lesson. So a sub 1, we're going to start with 2 a sub 0 plus 5. Because remember, I start with my initial value. So that would be a sub 0. And I double that and add 5. So now to do the round 2, I'm going to look at it like this. I'm going to look at it as, this is going to be 2a sub 1 plus 5. So let's actually do that. So I have 2 times 2a sub 0 plus 5, and then I'm going to add 5 to that. Alright, so if I go ahead and look at how I do this, then I'm going to show you how we're going to write this. Well, we're going to write this. So 2 times 2 is the same thing as 2 squared times a sub 0. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 5 would be 15. Okay? To find a sub 3, I'm going to do 2 times a sub 2 plus 5. I'm taking 2 and then whatever I got in 2. So we're going to go 2 times, all right, and then we'll write it out, 2 times 2a sub 0 plus 15, and then we have to add 5 to that. All right, so now what do I have? I have 3 2's, which is 2 cubed times a sub 0 plus, well, 2 times 15 is 30 plus 5 is 35. All right. Now to find a sub 4, I'm going to take 2 a sub 3 and add 5. All right, so let's take that. So I've got 2 times, all right, so a sub 3 was 2 cubed times a sub 0 plus 35, and then I have to add my 5. Well, 2 cubed times 2 is now 2 to the 4th times a sub 0. 2 times 35 is 70 plus 5 is 75. Okay? Alright, so using one of the 4 formulas from example 1, write an inequality that, if solved for a sub 0, will lead to finding the smallest starting whole number for the double and add 5 game that produces the result of 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds or fewer. All right, so this question is loaded with a lot of things. All right, so we kind of need to look at this and see what everything is asking us. All right, so we'll have to interpret these correctly in order to formulate this equation. All right, so let's do this. So what does a sub 2 mean in terms of the rounds? So a sub 2 is the result of round 2. Okay? So then let's look at the statement, produce a result of 1,000 or greater in 2 rounds. All right, we're going to write what the statement means using a term of the sequence. So the result of round 2, or A2, must be greater than or equal to 1,000. All right, so how would I write that as an inequality? Well, I'm going to say that it has to be A sub 2, which is the result of round 2, has to be greater than or equal to 1,000. All right? So after replacing a sub 2 in the inequality, a sub 2 is greater than or equal to 1,000, with the expression in terms of a sub 0, what do the numbers a sub 0 that satisfy the inequality for a sub 0 plus 15 is greater than 1,000 mean? Okay, so basically what I'm looking at replacing this here, a sub 2, with this. All right, so I'm going to replace that. So it's going to be 4a sub 0 plus 15 has to be greater than or equal to 1,000. All right, because that's what we figured out a sub 2 was. It came out to this general equation. All right, so we're going to create this into our inequality. Okay, so what does that mean? What does this mean? The numbers a sub 0 that satisfy the inequality are the starting numbers for the double and add 5 game that produce a result of 1,000 or greater in 2 rounds or fewer. The or fewer in the previous sentence is important and can be understood by thinking about the question. Do we need 2 rounds to reach 1,000, starting with numbers 999, 800, 500. So we've got to look at, do we have to have 2 rounds to get where we want to be? Okay? Alright, so let's look at this. So we want to solve for a sub 0. And I'm going to find the smallest whole number for exactly 2 rounds. Alright, so how would I do that? Well, I'm going to subtract 15. Alright, so I get 4a sub 0 is greater than or equal to 985. Alright, so then we're going to do 985 divided by 4. I get 246.25. So I'm going to round that. So a sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to 247 because I have to have a whole number. Remember, we're only working with whole numbers here. So a sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to 247 in order to get 1,000 or greater in 2 rounds. Alright, what inequality in terms of a sub 0 would you write down to find the smallest starting number for the double add 5 game that produces a result of 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds? Alright, so now we're going to look at 3 rounds. Well, let's go back here. We've got 3 rounds was 2 cubed times a sub 0 plus 35. So 2 cubed is 8. So for 3 rounds, I'm going to put that it would have to be 8a sub 0 plus 35 would have to be greater than or equal to 1,000. Okay? Alright. So, this is what it looks like. All they ask us to do is write an inequality. Alright? This is what they ask us to do. So let's go to exercise 2. So now exercise 2 says solve that inequality. Solve the inequality derived in exercise 1 and interpret your answer and validate that it is the solution to the problem. That is, show that the whole number you found results in 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds, but the previous whole number takes 4 rounds to reach 1,000. Alright, so let's go ahead and solve this. So we had 8a sub 0 plus 35 has to be greater than or equal to 1,000. Okay? So I'm going to solve it just like I would an equation. I'm going to subtract that 35 from both sides, and I get 965. I'm going to divide by 8. So a sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to, alright, so 965 divided by 8 gives us this fraction, or gives us this decimal here. Okay, so I'm going to look at it like this. I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. So a sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to 965 over 8. Okay? When I do this, I get a decimal of 120.625. Alright, which means a sub 0 must be greater than or equal to 120 and 625 thousandths. Alright? So that means, so it wants us to interpret that. So this is the set of all starting numbers that reach 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds or fewer. Alright, so this is the starting number. We're going to say this is the set of all starting numbers that reach 1,000 or greater in 3 rounds or less. Okay? I'm sorry, I didn't realize my paper wasn't in view. So, there's that. You can write that down. So, what has to be my smallest starting number? I can't use a fraction or a decimal because I am looking at whole numbers. So I know that the smallest starting whole number would be 121. Okay, so I know that would be my smallest starting whole number was 121. Okay, so what I can do is I'm going to start with 121. Alright, so here is my double and add. So I have 121 times 2 plus 5 gives me what? 242, 247. Alright. So when I do that, I take 247 times 2 plus 5 gives me 499. And 499 times 2 plus 5 gives me 1,003. So I did get over 1,000 in 3 rounds or less. So it tells me to show that the previous whole number takes 4 rounds. So the previous whole number would be 120. Alright, so let's see how long it takes me to get to 1,000. $245. So I take 245 times 2 plus 5 is 495. 495 times 2 plus 5 gives me 995. Notice I have not hit 1,000 yet. I'm really close, but I haven't hit that yet. So 995 times 2 plus 5 would give me 1,995. So 120 takes 4 rounds. Alright, so I've proven that 121 is the smallest starting whole number to get 1,000. Alright? Find the smallest starting whole number for the double add 5 game that produces a result of 1 million or greater in 4 rounds or fewer. Okay, so for 4 rounds, let's go back. 4 rounds, it would have to be this. So 2 to the 4th, so 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So we have 16 a sub 0 plus 75 has to be greater than or equal to 1 million. Okay? So I'm going to subtract that 75 from a million. Alright? So I get 16 a sub 0 is greater than or equal to 999,925. divide that by 16. So A sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to 999,925 sixteenths. I'm going to divide that by 16. And I get A sub 0 has to be greater than or equal to, look at this. Has to be greater than 62,495 and 312 thousandths. So therefore, I know that I have to have a number that is A sub 0 must be greater than or equal to 62,496 in order to get a million or greater in 4 rounds or less. Alright? Now, I can prove this, and I'll tell you we won't spend the whole time figuring this out. But when I do 62,496 in 4 rounds, I get 1,011,011. Alright? Now if I go to 62,495 in 4 rounds, I get 999,995. Okay? So that proves that I need to have this in order to get in 4 rounds or fewer. Guys, short lesson. Hopefully it's not too confusing, but this is something that you can use throughout your testing. You will see sequences that deal with things like this, so just kind of keep this in mind. All right, guys, have a great week.